Hi, and welcome to the course, Introduction to QGIS. My name is Kurt Menke. So in this course, we're going to cover an introduction to QGIS. This will include a little bit about the project itself and its history, working with QGIS, go into adding some data, especially using Danish plugins from your drive, from databases, and other connections. We'll work with attribute information. We'll also work with symbolizing and visualizing your data via several interfaces, how to create a print layout and export that, and then finally how to edit features. And then we'll conclude with question and answer period, and you'll get your QGIS certificates. So QGIS is open source, and what does that mean? Well, mainly it has to do with the software license. So a proprietary software such as Microsoft PowerPoint has a license that restricts your usage in some way. So this might be the time the software will operate, the number of features you have access to, the number of computers you can install it on, etc. An open source software such as QGIS also has a software license, but it flips that upside down and grants you rights and freedoms as an end user. So the four major tenets of an open source software license are that you can run the program as you wish for any purpose, study how the program works. That's where access to the source code comes into play. You can redistribute copies so you can help your neighbor, and distribute copies of your modified versions to others. So QGIS, as a desktop GIS software, allows you to view data, visualize data, analyze and edit data, and create maps. And it was all started in 2002 by this gentleman, Gary Sherman, who needed a PostGIS data viewer and decided to write his own software. Now in 2022, we're at version 3.2.2 or version 3.2.6. There's always two versions of QGIS available. One is called the LTR, which stands for long-term release. And every spring, this version is released, and it will be maintained for a year with bug fixes, but no new features. So it'll be a nice, stable piece of software for a whole calendar year. So this is what we recommend to most users, so that you don't have to worry about anything changing in the software for the year. Every 4 months, there's also a new stable release produced. And so the stable release right now is 3.2.6. The long-term release is 3.2.2. You can actually have both installed at the same time. And if you're really interested in some of the new features, you might choose to install one of the latest releases to see what those new features are. And QGIS is also available on almost every operating system out there. One of the things that makes QGIS so powerful is that it incorporates a whole series of other open source projects underneath the hood. So there's a software called Proj for dealing with coordinate systems. There's GDAL and OGR for reading and writing raster and vector data. There's some processing tools from GRASS and Saga incorporated into QGIS, and it also has support for PostGIS. So all of this combined is what helps make QGIS so powerful. This is a view of the data source manager, which is one of the ways you can add data to QGIS. And it is really like a Swiss Army knife of geodata, because it will read and write a huge number of vector and raster formats. It will also read mesh data and point cloud data. It has connections to many databases and connections to VMS, VFS, and VCS data services. There are plugins to QGIS, some of which are written by the core QGIS team and some of which are written by private individuals. There's a search box here, so if I start typing Denmark in there, I'll see all of the plugins related to open Danish geodata. I can switch to the installed tab and clear my search and see all the different plugins that I have installed, and I can just toggle one on or off to start using it. So a typical QGIS workflow involves creating a QGIS project, which is a QGZ file. So you may start with an empty QGIS project, and add layers as you need to. You may start with an existing QGIS project or build on a template, a QGIS project template. So whichever way you go, you may choose to load more data into your project, set up the data with a style and perhaps filters and other settings. And then you can perform your data analysis or create maps and edit your data. So it's a best practice with QGIS to just save continuously. That avoids the situation where you may have been working for a couple hours and QGIS crashes and you lose all your work. QGIS tends to be pretty stable, but all software crashes from time to time. So it's just wise to get into the habit of saving your project. This is the interface to QGIS. When you first open it, you'll have this welcome page, and this will include thumbnails to your recent projects that you've opened, and you can click on those to just open up those projects quickly. There's also a news feed from the QGIS project, which may have things like announcements of a new release version of QGIS. There's a section for project templates. And then down here you have the layers panel and the browser panel. So when you're here at the welcome screen, if you want to start a new project, you can click this white button up here and it will just clear all of this with an empty map canvas, and you can start loading your data. You can load your data using the browser panel, which is a view of your hard drive. You'll see your layers then in the layers panel here. And then there are a series of toolbars and menus to help you move around the software. There's also a status bar that will display the coordinates of your cursor, show you what scale you're working at, and things like that. So QGIS also has a large array of geoprocessing tools, which means tools for manipulating and analyzing your geodata. So there's a toolbox with hundreds of tools in it. There's a search box at the top that you can use to search for keywords, so it makes it easy to find the tool you're looking for. There's a batch processing environment here, which allows you to run the same process on several files at the same time. This animation here is showing the processing modeler, which is a modeler that exists in QGIS where you can basically visually design an entire workflow with all the data inputs and processing tools and generate your own processing tool based on those models. And then there's also a Python console and a QGIS Python API, so you can actually even do things within QGIS with Python code in this Python console. There are QGIS related data collection apps. There's one called QField, developed by OpenGIS-CH, and there's another one called Mergin Maps, developed by Lutra Consulting. At Septima, we have a course on Mergin Maps, so you may be interested in taking that course where you can learn how to collect data in a short 2-hour course using this system. QGIS also has a whole series of symbology tools. So this is a rather busy slide, but it shows you, for example, all the renderers you can use for point data, for line data, polygon data, and raster data. And for each one of these, there are these symbol layer types that you can use in combination with the main renderers. And so QGIS has state-of-the-art symbology. And with all of these renderers available, there are almost limitless possibilities for symbolizing your data. QGIS also includes things like blending modes. So here, a blending mode is used to show road density in roads in North Sjælland and around Copenhagen. There's also a 3D viewer, which allows you to create 3D fly-throughs and animations. This is Mons Klint in 3D. And QGIS supports data called mesh data, which is used a lot with weather data. And this also supports time, and you can create a temporal animation. This is one done of Hurricane Ian, which hit Florida in the US in early September. And you can do similar animations for storms that have occurred over Denmark. So here's the December orkanen that happened in December 1999 and was one of the strongest storms to ever hit Denmark. So that's a brief introduction to QGIS. Some of these things I covered at the end are things that are more advanced that we won't cover in the intro course, but give you an idea of what you can do with QGIS. And these are some of the things that we offer in some of our other courses. For example, some of these are topics covered in the data visualization with QGIS course or the Merge and Maps data collection course. Now I'm going to get out of PowerPoint and give you a brief demo of the QGIS interface and how to add data and work with the panels and toolbars in QGIS.
Okay, so here I have QGIS open and I have my welcome page. So I see recent project thumbnails. The first time you use QGIS, when you don't have any recently saved projects, you won't see anything listed there. This will grow as you use QGIS. I see my news feed, project templates, and even a nice message down here, new QGIS version available. I'm using the long-term release 3.22, and this is just telling me that there's a latest release 3.24 available, just information. I see a couple panels here and my toolbars. So if I want to add new data to this project, it would erase this project screen and bring up my map canvas with that layer loaded. I can also click the new project button, and that will just replace the welcome screen with an empty map canvas. It's not a required step, it's just how that interface works. So I'm going to go to my favorites here, which are ways to save project folders, which I'll describe in the course. And I'm going to just add some data. So I'm going to add a Camuna layer here from the browser panel. I'm going to right click on the layer and choose Add Layer to Project. And so now I see a data layer on my map, and it comes in with a random color that I can change. And on my layers panel, I see that one layer now added. And you can see here there's little icons in the browser panel next to my GES layers that shows whether it's a point or a polygon or a line layer. So if I add a line layer to my map, I will see that on the map canvas. And if I add another point layer, I will see that. So one note about these panels, they can be docked, and so that means that you can put them where you want them to be. If I left click on the title of my layers panel and start dragging it, I will see this blue rectangle appear, and that's if I let go of my left mouse button, this panel would be repositioned in that spot where the blue panel is. So I can move this and make it a free floating panel, put it onto a second monitor. I could move it to the right hand side of QGIS. I could put it back where it was below the browser panel. But what a lot of users end up doing with this layer and browser panel is that they stack them on top of one another. So if I drag this over the browser panel so that blue rectangle covers the whole browser panel and I let go, this layers panel will now be stacked on top of the browser panel, and you'll see tabs down below so that I can toggle between the two panels. And especially on a laptop screen, which is small, many users find this to be a nicer setup because you can see the whole browser tab when you're using that, and you can see the whole layers panel. Sometimes you get quite a long list of layers, and if you have them both occupying half the space, then it becomes hard to read and hard to look at. So that's how you can reposition those. I could even reposition both of these stacked panels onto the right side of QGIS if I wanted to. So you can move these panels around as you need to. And the same is true with these toolbars. There's a little stippled vertical line to the left edge of every toolbar, and if you hover over that, the name of the toolbar will show in a pop-up. So here I'm hovering over the attributes toolbar, and if I left click on that, I can move that toolbar and undock it or put it in a different position. So you can move the panels and the toolbars wherever you'd like them to be. So I've got 3 layers loaded: archaeological points, cycle routes, and Camuna, point, line, and polygon. And there's a drawing order here. So for example, if I drag Camuna to the top of the layers list, it will now cover those other 2 layers. So I don't see the archaeological sites for the cycle routes here because they're underneath my Camuna polygon layer. So you need to organize these layers in the appropriate order. Usually that's points over lines over polygons, but there may be exceptions. There are some pan and zoom tools here on this map navigation toolbar. So I can use this to zoom in to part of the map. Once I've zoomed in, I can use the zoom last button to move back to the previous extent. So the zoom last and zoom next buttons just allow you to toggle back and forth between whatever extents you've been at. It can be very handy. I can also see from the menu bar that there's this data for Sooning menu. This is the data for Sooning plugin that allows you access to a lot of open Danish data sets. For example, here's Baggrundsquote, and I could add Skamquote Dempel, and it will add this background map to my map canvas. And now this is on top of my 3 layers, so I'm going to drag it beneath them so that I can see those layers. But now I get a little context for where the study area is. You can access more panels and toolbars from the View menu. So if I choose the View menu, near the bottom, I'll see an option for panels. So I can see the browser panel is checked and the layer panel is checked. And there's other panels that I may choose to open. And there's also a toolbars section, and you can see which toolbars I have turned on, and I could turn some of those off or turn on other ones as I need to. Another way to get to these panels and toolbars is to right click here and you'll see the same list. So what happens sometimes is you may accidentally click this X and turn off the layers panel and wonder how to get it back. I can simply right click and find my layers panel and turn it back on, and now I have my layers panel back. Down at the bottom you can see the coordinate position where my cursor is and the scale that I'm at. There are some predefined scales, so I could zoom into 1 to 10,000, for example. Another useful panel that we'll use a lot in the course is the layer styling panel, and you can open that by clicking this button in the upper left corner of the layers panel. Open the layer styling panel. And this will open up to the right hand side of QGIS. It's a panel like any other though, so you can left click on the title bar and undock it and put it where you'd like. And this allows you to change the symbology. So here I'm going to use this pan button. This pan button allows me to slide the map and stay at the same scale, but reposition the map where I want it to be. So I have a set of archaeological sites here, and if I wanted to change the symbol, QGIS comes with some predefined symbols, so I could choose diamond red to change them to that, or make them black dots. And for any of these symbols, I can also go in here and do things like change the fill color. We will work on symbology in the course, but that's how that can work. And if I right click on a layer, I'll also see a set of options for actions I can take with that layer. So if I choose zoom to layer, this will zoom me to the extent of this entire layer. So that's another nice option. Sometimes if you want to figure out where a layer is, you can right click on it, choose zoom to layer to make sure you're zoomed to the extent. Because as I mentioned, it may be that you don't see it, and that may be because it's underneath another layer and you simply need to move it above so that it's visible. Another option I get by right clicking on a layer is properties, the very last option here. This will open up layer properties, excuse me. And there's a whole series of tabs on the left hand side that will give me different information or allow me to configure the layer in different ways. The information tab will tell me where this layer is on my hard drive, how big it is, what format the data is, how many features are in it, the coordinate system, some important things like that. So that's a quick introduction to the QGIS interface. Now that I've been working in QGIS, I may want to save my project. So I could simply click the Save Project diskette and go in here and save this as demo into my project folder. And now I will see the word demo here because I named my QGIS project, my QGIS file demo. So your project name will be up here, and I will see if I pan the map a little bit or make a change, like turn this layer off, a little asterisk will appear next to the project. When that little asterisk is there, it means you have unsaved changes to your project. So if I click the diskette to save my project, that asterisk will go away and the project is saved. If I make a change to my project, like simply turning on a layer, and I go to exit QGIS from the project menu, it will tell me that I have unsaved changes to the project and will ask me if I want to save those changes or discard. So typically, it's hard to make a mistake. If you have changes, QGIS will tell you that you need to save those before you exit. So that's a short introduction, and I look forward to meeting you and working with you in the course.